Welcome back, focused learners, to today's explainer. We're diving into an incredibly fascinating ancient text called the Cūḷataṇhāsaṅkhaya Sutta. I know, that name is a bit of a mouthful, but trust me, the story inside is wildly relatable. We are going to explore exactly what happens when you have all the wealth, all the entertainment, and literally all the success in the universe, and how that absolute abundance can make you completely forget the things that actually matter.
Okay, let's dive into this, because the central hook of our story is just dripping with irony. We're looking at Sakka, who is literally the king of gods in Buddhist cosmology. He is a supreme celestial being. Now, you'd think someone with a title like that would have perfect memory, perfect discipline, and ultimate wisdom, right? But no way. Even a god can get totally derailed and distracted by his own massive success. So how does a being with ultimate power completely blank on the universe's most profound lesson? Well, let's trace it back to where it all began.
Our timeline starts right here on Earth, specifically at the Buddha Monastery. Just picture a place of profound silence, simplicity, and serene wisdom. It's the exact opposite of our chaotic, busy lives. And into this quiet setting, Sakka, the majestic king of gods, descends from the heavens to approach the Buddha. He comes seeking an answer to the ultimate philosophical question: how does one entirely end craving and achieve complete spiritual liberation? It's a super heavy, profound question being asked in the most perfectly peaceful environment you can imagine. And the Buddha replies with this absolutely incredible core philosophical anchor: all things should not be clung to. In the original text, this is the translation of the famous phrase, "Tamatang buong me kuan yut man." Just take a second and let that sink in. This isn't just a casual piece of advice. This is the master key to spiritual liberation. The idea is that by completely releasing our attachment to absolutely everything, our desires, our status, our everyday comforts, we can actually finally free ourselves from suffering.
Now, to make this incredibly dense philosophical concept actually usable, the Buddha breaks it down into a highly actionable 4-step checklist. Step 1, you actually have to hear and study the truth of non-attachment. Step 2, when you experience any feeling, whether it's total joy, deep pain, or just, a neutral feeling, you have to fully understand it without being swept away by it. Step 3, you observe its impermanence. You realize that this feeling will inevitably fade. And finally, step 4, because you know it won't last, you simply let go of clinging to it. It's a flawless, logical progression leading right to the end of craving. Sakka hears this, he's totally thrilled, pays his respects, and vanishes straight back to heaven. But here is where our narrative takes a really fascinating turn. Sitting nearby during this whole exchange is one of the Buddha's chief disciples, a monk named Moggallana, who is actually renowned for his immense psychic powers. Moggallana watches the king of gods leave and thinks to himself, wait, did he actually understand that? Or was he just doing the whole smile and nod routine? Moggallana highly suspects Sakka might not have truly absorbed the gravity of the lesson. And just like that, our cosmic detective arc is launched. Moggallana decides he needs to go verify this for himself.
To really understand the tension here, we have to look at the massive contrast between these two figures. On one side, we have Moggallana, a highly disciplined ascetic monk. He owns nothing, lives in absolute simplicity, and has a hyper-focused mind. On the other side, we have Sakka, the king of gods, completely dripping in opulence, ruling over a realm built on literally infinite distractions. It's the ultimate clash of lifestyles. The monk of absolute minimalism is about to drop in on the king of absolute maximalism. And I mean literally drop in. The source text says that as quickly as a strong man bends his arm, Moggallana instantly teleports from that quiet monastery directly into the Tavatims of heaven. Talk about sensory whiplash. He arrives in a celestial realm defined by overwhelming sensory pleasure. It is incredibly loud, it is bright, and it is completely overstimulating. Moggallana materializes in a divine garden right while Sakka is kicking back, being entertained by a roaring orchestra of 500 divine musicians. Totally surprised by the sudden appearance of this powerful monk, Sakka pauses the 500 musicians and welcomes him. But Moggallana doesn't waste time with small talk. He immediately asks Sakka to recount the teaching the Buddha just gave him. And Sakka's response? It is hilariously, painfully relatable. He basically says, look man, I have a lot of duties. I'm managing this massive heavenly realm, taking care of all these gods. What I learn, I quickly forget. The king of gods uses the exact same excuse we use today when we skip the gym. He's just too busy.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why he's so busy. Just look at the absurd mathematical scale of Sakka's sensory overload described in the text. His newly built Vajrayana palace has 100 floors. Each floor has 700 rooms. Each room has 700 celestial nymphs. And get this, every single nymph has 700 divine attendants. If you do the math on that, that is literally tens of billions of attendants in a single palace. It becomes completely understandable why a guy living in this environment might lose his focus and forget a four-step philosophy about non-attachment. So instead of actually answering Moggallana's question about the Buddhist teaching, Sakka does what any proud homeowner would do. He offers to give the monk a grand palace tour. Accompanied by another divine ruler, King Vasavana, Sakka proudly walks the ascetic monk through this massive, glittering, heavenly estate. He's essentially showing off his ultimate entertainment system. Meanwhile, the text notes that the celestial nymphs are actually hiding in their rooms in deep embarrassment because, well, an austere holy monk is walking through their giant party house. As Moggallana politely tags along on this tour of absolute excess, a profound realization dawns on him. He looks at this king of gods, who just hours ago was asking the most important spiritual question in the universe, now completely obsessed with his own luxury. Moggallana thinks he is living entirely too negligently. He realizes Sakka is just drowning in superficial luxury. Gentle questioning isn't going to work here. Sakka desperately needs a harsh, undeniable wake-up call to shatter his cozy little illusion of security. So Moggallana decides to provide that wake-up call, and he does it in the most epic way possible. Standing right in the middle of this supposedly indestructible divine megastructure, Moggallana channels his intense psychic power. He presses his big toe against the floor of the Vajrayana palace, and he violently rocks and shakes the entire structure. With just a single toe, he creates a massive heavenly earthquake that makes the indestructible palace completely shudder and quake. The result is absolute terror in heaven. The flawless, perfect world of the gods is literally rocked to its core. Sakka, King Vasavana, and the entire heavenly host are struck with utter shock, awe, and sheer panic. The text says their hair literally stands on end. They're marveling and trembling, realizing in real time that even their supreme, unimaginably opulent realm is entirely fragile. It can be tossed around like a chew toy by a single, focused monk. Their illusion of permanent safety and ultimate power is instantly shattered. And right at that exact moment, while the adrenaline is pumping, the palace is still physically settling, and Sakka's mind is completely stripped of all its arrogant, luxurious distractions, Moggallana masterfully strikes. He doesn't give a long lecture, he just casually poses the very same pop quiz from the beginning. So, by the way, how did the Buddha briefly explain the end of craving to you? Moggallana uses this moment of sheer panic to force Sakka to focus on what truly matters.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that the shock treatment absolutely worked. Suddenly, the fog clears. With the distractions shaken away, Sakka's memory is completely restored. He perfectly recites the Buddha's exact formula, word for word, back to Moggallana. He remembers that everything, even his billion-room megapalace, is impermanent, and that you have to fully understand those feelings and let go of clinging to achieve true peace. He finally gets it. Satisfied that the lesson stuck, Moggallana vanishes, leaving heaven just as quickly as he arrived. Shortly after, Sakka's nymphs come peeking out of hiding, totally awestruck by the earthquake. And they ask Sakka, "Was that your teacher, the Buddha?" And in this really beautiful, humbling moment, Sakka admits that, no, that wasn't the Buddha. That was just Moggallana, a fellow disciple. He points them back to the ultimate source of wisdom, basically acknowledging that if a mere student has this much power and clarity, the Buddha's wisdom must be truly boundless. Back on Earth, our story comes full circle. Moggallana instantly teleports back to the quiet, serene Pubarama Monastery. But being a meticulous student and a pretty stellar cosmic detective, he doesn't just assume his test was a success. He goes directly to the Buddha to fact-check the entire sequence of events. He asks the Buddha to recount exactly what was taught to Sakka earlier that day, just to guarantee that what Sakka recited up in heaven was indeed the uncorrupted truth. And bringing our pacing back down to a calm, grounded rhythm, the Buddha confirms the doctrine. Word for word, he repeats the exact steps of non-attachment, noting that he remembers teaching this precisely to the King of Gods. The chaotic, overstimulating narrative of the heavenly realm is completely resolved by the steady, unchanging truth of the Buddha's wisdom. The lesson remains identical, whether it is spoken softly in a quiet monastery
or recited in a trembling, shaking celestial palace. So, as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a direct challenge. Look, we might not have billions of attendants or celestial musicians on standby, but we are constantly bombarded by our own modern sensory overloads, right? Smartphones, endless content, career status, the pursuit of luxury. So, what is the Vijayandar Palace in your life? What is the elaborate, comfortable distraction that causes you to forget the fundamental truths and goals you set for yourself? Maybe it's time to let go of the clinging, clear away the noise, and get back to what actually matters. Thank you so much for learning with me today, and I'll see you in the next one.